Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to 2025 with the Amelie Moran podcast. I thought we'd kick off this year by talking about one of my favorite places that I traveled to, Costa Rica. Today, we're going to dive into all things you need to know before going to Costa Rica, specifically Huacas and San Jose, which are the two places that I went to. I'm going to spill all of the tea about all the little mishaps, all the little adventures that we went on, all of the jaw-dropping beaches, and everything that made it so unforgettable. Let's firstly talk about Huacas, which is on the west coast. We actually stayed in Guanacaste, I think is how you say it. It's just further along towards the coast from Huacas, but Huacas I would say is like the main town, main city kind of area, I guess. Guanacaste is a very small town. If you blink, you'll miss it kind of thing. Very, very small, lots of locals, and it's a really, really relaxed vibe, lots of beaches. It's also really close to Tamarindo and Playa Conchal, which are quite famous kind of areas of Costa Rica. So I feel like you get the best of both worlds because you can travel in between these quite freely. Sam and I were actually really lucky that we were able to stay with some family friends who were living in Costa Rica at the time, and they were working in a school teaching, and they kindly invited us to come and stay with them whilst we were visiting Costa Rica. And it was so lovely. We were so lucky as well. They were the perfect distance from everything. You had access to the beach. You could go into a small town. It was really, really lovely. They had their sort of studio apartment, so we just stayed in the spare bedroom. And one thing I will say about being in Costa Rica is you 1,000% need aircon. It is so oppressive, the heat. It honestly feels like you're wading through the heat. So if you are going to Costa Rica, try and make sure that your hostel or wherever you're staying has aircon and it works. Also make sure to wear sun cream because when we arrived in Costa Rica, we'd just come from Nicaragua and I had gotten extremely burnt, and I can't recommend wearing sun cream enough, even though I have a track record of not wearing enough sun cream, but the UV in Costa Rica is absolutely insane. Just make sure that you're taking all precautions. Now, just something to mention, I guess, when you're crossing from Nicaragua to Costa Rica, when you're doing this border crossing by land, it's really, really simple to do on your own. We saw so many people trying to sell kind of almost tours or like bus rides across the border where they take you through the border. But I promise it's so much easier doing it by yourself, and you don't want to pay $70 for someone to just take you over the border when you could do it for yourself for free. We specifically got a taxi to the border from our hostel in Nicaragua, did the whole border crossing, got all of our stamps, got everything sorted with our passport, security, blah, blah, blah. And then we just waited for a bus on the other side when we got into Costa Rica. Bearing in mind the bus stops in Costa Rica specifically, we noticed had no sort of signs or information of which bus was going where or what stops the bus was going to be stopping at, what towns it was going to, what time the bus comes. We had absolutely no idea, and we sort of just had to risk it. I ended up trying to, in broken Spanish, speak to somebody at the bus stop we were at, try and explain to them where we were going, because also we were going to a tiny town. There wasn't a direct bus from the border to this town. So we were going to have to get two buses, which made it even a bit more complicated, slightly stressful. It was quite overwhelming just handing your bag off to a stranger from this bus, praying that the bus is taking you to the right place. But we took a chance and we were completely fine. I just think it's really worth mentioning that you can do it on your own, because we were approached by a lot of people at the border asking to pay quite a lot of money for something that you can just do by yourself. You really don't need to get someone else or a third party to help you through it. Next up, I have to mention the beaches in Costa Rica, obviously. I can't remember any of the names of the beaches we went to specifically, which may be helpful if you want to go and stay in the area we stayed in. But all I can tell you is that there were so many, and I feel like in Costa Rica, you're going to find a beach somewhere, especially on the coast, obviously, and they're all going to be just as stunning as each other. But as I said before, we were around the Guanacaste sort of area, if that helps. The morning after we'd arrived, Sam and I actually went with one of our family friends and went and explored quite a few of the beaches in the area. We took a really long walk, which was lovely. We also got to see some wildlife. Now, this wasn't maybe the experience that we were looking for necessarily. It ended up not maybe being the nicest way to see the wildlife, but it was still really special. Sam actually found a baby turtle on the beach, which was really sweet, and we weren't planning on going to see any eggs hatching for the baby turtles or like putting them in the water or anything. There are tours you can do, obviously, where you get to do that, but it wasn't something we were looking for. So this felt quite special when Sam found it, but it ended up dying, which was really sad. It looked like it was struggling, so we kept trying to push it back into the water, but I think what had happened was the eggs had hatched on the beach maybe earlier that morning, but it clearly didn't make it to the sea, or maybe it got lost on the way or something. So that wasn't the nicest way to be introduced to the wildlife, but it was really, really sweet nonetheless. In all honesty, I feel like the best thing to do at the beach is watch the sunset. I know I say this in every episode. I know that I think every sunset I see is the best one I've seen, but genuinely, the Costa Rican sunsets on the beach were absolutely phenomenal. There was one night where we drove down to the beach with the family friends and we all just watched the sunset, and it was so lovely because everybody from the town is gathered on the beach at sunset. Everyone's watching it together. Some people were surfing, some people were boogie boarding, swimming in the sea. It was so, so lovely. Another thing that is really good to do at the beach is to grab a fresca, which is their lemonade, or some beers, and just go and sit on the beach for the day. I think that was one of the best things we did, even though it's so simple and it's not entirely adventurous. It's so, so lovely. And also it's quite fun exploring the beaches because you'll find these hidden gems. Like Sam and I found this random shack, middle of nowhere on the beach. And this woman was selling the frescas and the beers. And she also was selling this homemade banana bread, which was absolutely unreal. It was so good. And I don't know why, but banana bread seems to be the most accessible food in Central America, if not even more in South America. Everywhere sells banana bread. Everyone's making banana bread, selling it at markets and things. But this banana bread was absolutely unreal, and it was such a random place to find it. We were just on the beach, middle of the day. It was very strange. But we bought some, had it on the beach, and then couldn't wait to go back later when we were leaving to grab some more for like dessert or something after dinner. And the shack had closed, so we were quite sad. We were really mourning that banana bread because it was so, so nice, but also just such a nice random find and was not something we were expecting to see at all. But anyway, in summary, I feel like the best thing you can do in Costa Rica is just find a beach and relax. I think that is literally the absolute best thing to do. I do understand that all around Costa Rica there's such beautiful sights to see, but I feel like sitting on the beach, going in the sea is just the nicest part of the whole place. It just makes you feel extremely relaxed, and I think the slow pace of it all is really comforting, especially when you're backpacking and you might be quite fast paced moving from place to place. I think it's such a nice country to just slow down for a second and just take it all in. Moving on to San Jose, which is the other place we went to in Costa Rica, which is the capital, I believe. We specifically went to this one place called Alajuela, which is a part of San Jose. We were only here for a day and a night because we wanted to be as close to the airport as we could because we needed to get our flight the day after we arrived to Panama City. My first impression of Alajuela is that it was extremely chaotic. Kind of try and think of it as like Mario Kart Rainbow Road kind of vibe. Like the driving is insane there. It's extremely busy, which kind of adds to the whole chaos, but in all honesty, it's just a really nice, pretty town, and there's quite a lot to do there. The streets are completely filled with local restaurants. They've got loads of traditional food stands. And I think it was quite a nice place, to be honest. I think it was quite difficult coming from the gorgeous beaches to a city, but it was still really, really nice. I just think also I was quite sad to be leaving Costa Rica. I think something changed when we were on those beaches, and it was just the most lovely, relaxing time. So I think coming to the city was maybe a bit jarring, especially in the same heat where you had the beach before. You are now experiencing in a very sweaty city. And And I have to confess something. Not necessarily the proudest of, no, give a fuck. Yeah, I don't care. Sam and I did a very touristy thing when we were here, and we were supposed to be on a backpacker budget, obviously. But Costa Rica, I would say, is quite Western. It's got a lot of Western shops, which we kind of noticed, not in like the coastal towns, but in San Jose, in Alajuela, there are a lot of Western shops. And Sam and I spotted a Denny's near the airport. If you don't know what Denny's is, it's this American breakfast place, and their portions are absolutely massive. They do things like full English, loads of different types of coffee, pancakes, maple syrup, like everything you could think of for breakfast. They have it at Denny's. Basically, think of it as like the most sickly meal you could have and all the sugar you could ever want. That's how I think of it. But look, we had eaten so cleanly. We had eaten so well in Costa Rica the days before. We only ate fresh fruit and veg, like home cooked meals. We did not eat anything that was bad for you, I guess. So we kind of just saw it and thought, fuck it, let's just have a Western breakfast. So before catching our flight to Panama City, we went to this Denny's for breakfast. I can't tell you how much I ate. It's actually quite disgusting, to be honest. It's quite grim. I've had Denny's in America before, so I sort of remembered the menu and remembered what I wanted to get. I personally get the full English breakfast with the side of pancakes. It actually like kind of grosses me out thinking about it, but you've got like sausages, eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast with butter, and then you have this side of pancakes which is covered in berries, which I'm like, okay, healthy, like that's fine, but then you drown it in maple syrup, and it's the best thing. You have like your savory meal, and then you can move on to the sweet, and it's just so good. I think it was the most expensive breakfast we had on our entire trip. I don't remember specifically how much it was, but I would say it was probably a day's budget just for that breakfast. And talking of food, I obviously couldn't do an episode about Costa Rica without talking about Costa Rican food. Sam and I still talk about the meals that we've had there to this day. We absolutely loved the food in Costa Rica, bar the Western Denny's breakfast. The authentic Costa Rican food is so good. It is really important, I think, to try and eat as fresh as you can, like the fruit and veg, because supermarkets in Costa Rica are extremely expensive. An avocado by itself was something like $3, something ridiculous, where it was more expensive than the UK. And we were quite shocked by that, because we knew that Costa Rica was seen as an expensive place to travel to, but I don't think we'd really realized how expensive. But I think one of the nicest things, specifically where we stayed on the coast, a lot of fresh fruit is actually in the garden or something, or it's like on the land around you. When Sam and I first arrived, we were taken out mango picking, and you just go with this big stick, you hook it around the tree, and then you just sort of shake and try and not bruise the mangoes as they come down. And then we went home, and that was our sort of dessert, and it was so nice, and it was so much fun as well. It's also an activity that you can do, and it's fun. Obviously, having to be careful of any wasps or bees. You don't want to disturb them. You'd be quite screwed if you did that. So you've obviously got to be cautious, but in general, really fun. But the meal that Sam and I will not stop talking about is pinto gallo, which we had when we were invited to our family friend's neighbor's house. They wanted to do like a Costa Rican brunch for us, show us proper Costa Rican food, all the traditional food that they have. And we were given this pinto gallo. We were having things like watermelon, chocolate covered berries, things like that to start off. And then the main meal was the pinto gallo. This consists of rice, beans, spices, I think bits of cheese, avocado, and egg. That's like what should be on the plate. And whilst it sounds extremely simple, I remember arriving and the neighbor explained that they'd actually been cooking and marinating the beans since last night. It's like a whole operation to make this meal. It's not quickly cook some rice, add some beans and things like that. It's like a whole thing. Almost like the operation of cooking Christmas dinner kind of vibe. It's like a really big deal. Then we had coffee. The Costa Rican coffee is absolutely delicious. I have to talk about how this coffee was made because I've never seen anything before it and it was so interesting to me. So when we were at the neighbor's house, we did this taste test of coffee. So one was made by a normal coffee machine that you'd have at home, and the other was made using a chorreador. I hope I'm saying that correctly, which is a traditional wooden stand that holds a cloth filter, often referred to as the sock, or you can actually use a new sock, and you pour the hot water over ground coffee, and then it filters into your mug underneath. I genuinely had my mind blown by this. I've never seen coffee made like this, and it tasted so much better than the ones from the machine. Sam and I were considering buying like a portable one so that we could bring it everywhere with us for the rest of the trip. It was absolutely amazing. If you're coming to Costa Rica, I would recommend having a coffee made in that way instead of doing the machine ones or like instant coffee or whatever. It was just so much nicer, so much better. Then for dessert for this brunch, we actually ended up having coconut, which all of the guys ended up going and picking from the garden, which is just insane to me. Like, we just don't get that in the UK. And it was so nice. The guys went out and picked all these coconuts that they could, brought them back, and then we split them open, and that was our dessert, and it was so lovely. As you can tell, I could go on for very long talking about Costa Rican food. I absolutely loved it, and I left that country extremely full and extremely satisfied. It's definitely one of my favorite cuisines. Now it's time for the Amelie Moran ranking system. So let's get into it. Food and drink, 10 out of 10. I feel like that was pretty obvious. I've kind of said my piece. I could talk about it forever, but I'll leave it there. Nightlife, 8 out of 10. It was a really nice community where we stayed. Lots of people out at night, out on the beach, especially in the evenings. And we didn't go like clubbing or like go out drinking or anything, but I would say the general vibe was so lovely. History and culture, I've said 10 out of 10. I think the culture in Costa Rica is absolutely beautiful. Accessibility and English level, I've said 9 out of 10. I think because it's very closely linked to America, Costa Rica. There are a lot of Americans there, a lot of English people, if not English speaking people. So we found it very easy to communicate with people. Safety, 9 out of 10. Probably one of the safest places I felt. Even when we were sort of stranded at the bus stations, not sure which way we were going, what bus we were catching, we weren't nervous at any point to ask anyone for help. Everyone was super friendly. There wasn't really a moment where we were a bit unsure about anything. I mean, maybe the border, but I feel like land borders are always quite scary in itself. You don't know what's going to happen. So I feel like Costa Rica is pretty safe, but let me know if you think differently. I'm sure there's, parts of Costa Rica that maybe aren't as safe. But for us, even in the city, I would say it felt pretty safe. Expenses, I've said 4 out of 10. And I've realized I'm doing this in a weird way, this expenses one. I'm saying 4 out of 10 because Costa Rica is very expensive. So for me, that's a negative. So I hope that makes sense, because I realized I've done this ranking quite strange for expenses, but the higher it is, the better it was in terms of cheapness. And then the lower the score means it's more expensive. Costa Rica is known for being very expensive. So we felt very grateful that we had people to go and stay with, because I don't know how much hostels are there, but I can't imagine that they're cheap because they're going to be in really beautiful areas. So let me know. I don't know too much about pricings for things like that, but when we went to the supermarket, we saw everything was very expensive. And overall, I've given Costa Rica 9 out of 10. Now just reflecting on the lessons maybe I've learned from Costa Rica, I would say it was really interesting being there because they have this phrase there, Pura Vida, which literally translates to pure life. But I think in the country, it goes beyond the literal translation, if that makes sense. It can be used as a greeting, a farewell, a response to how are you. It can be interchanged and used in so many different ways. And I feel like it's more of a way of life. As we spoke to more people, we understood that when you say it, it's more of a lifestyle, talking about optimism and positivity, relaxation, gratitude, and maybe even community. I think it's more about values that you live your life by rather than just a greeting or a saying. And I think it really reflects the sort of laid back nature of the country. Sam and I really tried to embrace this when we were there and throughout the rest of our trip, just kind of slowing down, embracing chaos, laughing about the small things, and just trying to make sure that we don't get too caught up in any tension. But if you have any mantras from places that you've traveled to, I would love to hear them, because I love things like this. I think it's so interesting. And I guess all I can say is if you're thinking of going to Costa Rica, or you're on the fence, or maybe you've never even considered it, my advice is just go and explore. There's so many other places in Costa Rica to explore that we didn't go to. And I know it's just a stunning country wherever you are. Make sure to subscribe and give this episode a like. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.